So, and keep in mind, this is like a 3-hour drive. And not like we just had to go up and go to the concert, which was in Toronto. No, we had to go to Stratford, Ontario. We had to go up a whole day early to go to Stratford, Ontario, to go to where Justin Bieber was born and go all around his hometown. We had to go to all the places, like the trails that he walked, this house, that building, his pizza shop, his favorite pizza shop. We had to touch the door handle. We had to go inside. We had to sit at his table, touch the table, and then, because that's not enough, maybe many of you have seen his YouTube video where he's playing the famous Jennifer Knapp song. It's the video that made him popular, and he's sitting on like these stairs outside of a theater. Yeah, I've sat on those stairs. So I have taken part in the Justin Bieber craze out of duty to my little sister, okay? However, Justin Bieber's mom was also in town, and she was doing a book signing the very next morning. So I drive us into Toronto and drop them off, and they go inside, and I go and park. And when I come back, as I'm walking in, I realize that there are these girls just bawling their eyes out, coming out of the bookstore. I'm like, what is going on? And so I go in more, and I see more and more girls just crying, and it begins to hit me. They are crying and bawling because they are meeting the mother of the object that they worship. The silent object, who they have never met, most of them have not met. The occasional girl has met him, paid a hefty price for it, is why I talked with one girl about that. But some of them have met him. But it was so much a part of their lives that they had devoted their lives to, but he had actually never really done anything particularly for him. See, the question isn't which God do you worship? There's so many. And you have to find out which one is specific to you. We can't really say, I don't worship one. We need to find out which one it is for us. So I asked you, what does your God look like? Is it success? Is it how well you can do in sports? How well you can do in school? Money, appearances? The best hairstyle or clothes? See, it's when people find and seek to find fulfillment in these gods, and these gods fail them, that they feel tormented inside. The Bible says that where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. In the movie Harry Potter, there's this great scene in there where Harry walks into a particular room, and in this room is a very large mirror called the Mirror of Erised. And when Harry looks into this mirror, he's expecting to see himself, right? Isn't that what happens when you usually look in a mirror? You see you, kind of what Cameron said earlier, you can't really find yourself, look in a mirror, and there you are, right? So he looks into this mirror, and he doesn't see himself. He sees his parents, who he's never really known. And this kind of throws him off. Well, in walks Dumbledore, and I want to read you this conversation that they have. Dumbledore walks in and says, I see that you, Harry, like so many before you, have discovered the delights of the Mirror of Erised. I trust by now you realize what it does. Let me give you a clue. The happiest man on earth would look into the mirror and see only himself, exactly as he is. So Harry says, so then it shows us what we want, whatever we want? Dumbledore says, yes and no. It shows us nothing more or less than the deepest and most desperate desires of our heart. But remember this, Harry. This mirror gives us neither knowledge or truth, and men have wasted away in front of it, even gone mad. That is why tomorrow it will be moved to a new home, and I must ask you not to go looking for it again. It does not do well to dwell on dreams and forget to live. What treasure is in your mirror? If you were to look into that mirror, what God would be looking back at you? Would you be surprised? Would you be shocked? Disappointed? For some of us, the deity that looks back at us in the mirror is what we wrestle with the most. Why do we worship God? Because we will worship something. And nothing else will ever be as accepting, forgiving, and fulfilling as someone who loves you, even if you haven't succeeded. St. Augustine said, "You awake us to light in your praise. For you have made us for yourself, God, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you." With that said, I want to look at this idea of who we are, identity. How do we define ourselves? How do you know who you are? The Google Dolls had a song back, I think, in the 90s, and I'm dating myself by saying this, called Iris. And the song says, "I don't want the world to see me because I don't think that they'll understand. When everything's made to be broken, I just want you to know who I am." Who are you? How do you define yourself? Is it based on how successful you've been at something over here or how well you've achieved this particular goal? See, the problem with identity in this world is that without God, identity is based on something that you do or on some subjective set of standards. And the problem is that when something changes, when one of those criteria changes, then who are you then? If your identity was that you're a star athlete and all of a sudden you get hurt, well, who are you now? Now there's a new goal scorer. How do you know how to define yourself? And even more so, how do we define people in this world who are born with physical or intellectual disabilities? What is the identity of somebody with Down syndrome, let's say? Would we say, well, they're not the football star, therefore they don't really have an identity? But what if we took identity out of the hands of people and gave it back to God? What would he say to us? He would say that your identity is intrinsic within you. And what do I mean by intrinsic? I mean that it relates to your essential nature. It belongs to your very nature. In other words, it was a part of you before you had the chance to earn it or even create it. So unlike your actions, which are manifestations of your character, personality, strengths, and weaknesses, your identity doesn't change with God. The atheist philosopher John Gray says, once we've relinquished Christianity, the very idea of the person becomes suspect. As an atheist, he recognizes this. Why is it so significant for your identity that God exists? Because you are intricately and masterfully created by the great Creator himself. Your identity isn't given to you, it's inherent within you. And any other identity that you or society creates for you will never compare to how beautiful God sees you. Ravi Zacharias says, you will never find meaning to be meaningful until you find out the purpose for which you were created. What God does is give you the grandest dignity when he tells you that you were created in the image of God. And with that, let's look at the second point of meaning and purpose. Einstein says it would be possible to describe absolutely everything scientifically, but it would make no sense. It would be without meaning, as if you described a Beethoven symphony as a variation of wave pressure. Meaning and purpose. Without God, life has no meaning. Why? Because it makes no ultimate difference that humans, or the universe for that matter, existed at all. There's no goal to this life. You are mankind are the blind products of matter, time, and chance. The philosopher William Craig describes it like this. He says, the universe itself carries within it no intrinsic meaning, unlike what we were just saying about what God says about us, and the identity of God, that we have an intrinsic meaning. The universe carries no intrinsic meaning, and any meaning that's given to it has been given to it by somebody. So if there's nothing in this universe saying that the universe matters at all, then there cannot be meaning in anything done for it or for people living here. Suppose the universe had never come into being. Well, it's going to end at some point, so I guess it really doesn't matter then. Who cares that it existed in the first place? And the same thing goes for us as people. If the universe will end, mankind will end. So it makes no ultimate difference that it ever existed. If the universe has no ultimate meaning, then your existence cannot either. And this means that man in the universe exists to no purpose, since the end of everything is death. And they came to be for no purpose. They're just blind products of chance. What you did on this earth without God is only relative significance. You develop and you find meaning and you create it. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter what you create. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't change what is. The atheist philosopher Bertrand Russell, who was very influential in atheist movements and philosophy and ideas, he says, man is the product of causes which have no provision, meaning like a dream, a prophetic vision or a dream. So man is the product of causes which had no idea, essentially, or a dream of the end that they were achieving. His origin, his growth, his hopes, his fears, his loves, and his beliefs, they're just the outcome of accidental collocations of atoms. All the labors of the ages, all the devotion, all the inspiration, all the noonday brightness of human genius are destined to extinction in the vast death of the solar system. And the whole temple of man's achievement must inevitably be buried beneath the debris of a universe in ruins. All these things, if not quite beyond dispute, are so certain that no philosophy which rejects them can hope to stand. And it's only on the scaffolding of these truths that a firm foundation of unyielding despair can the soul's habitation be safely built. Only on the firm foundation of unyielding despair can the soul's habitation be built. What a horrible thing to say. But yet, he's right if there is no God. He is being consistent with his atheistic ideologies. Here today, gone tomorrow. Nothing's any different because you existed. It doesn't really matter at all. The universe is doomed, and we have no meaning. I was reading something that one psychologist recently wrote on this, and she has people that come to her who struggle with this idea of having no meaning or no purpose in life, and the despair that they feel. And so they come to her, and I want you to hear the advice the psychologist gives them. She says, stop living as though you need to have a purpose in your life. Instead, find what gives your life meaning today. Look at your life and begin to feel all is well. Quit weighing yourself down with the need for purpose and your fear of feeling unfulfilled at life's end. Instead of seeking to have it all, seek to feel as if you have it all already. Your life will unfold with more ease and grace. So the way then that we deal with the despair of not feeling like we have any purpose is just to pretend we do. And that's the words of comfort that we get. Just pretend that you have something. But what does God say about the meaning and purpose of our lives? Is there one? What would this mean with God? He says that our meaning and purpose is to glorify God and worship him forever. We are to experience the love of God. We are to experience his creation so that we have someone to thank, unlike the friend I referred to earlier today. We will know the truth of who we are, our identity, and knowing the truth of who we are, that can therefore help us to live on this earth and know why we are here. When you know your meaning, you can understand your purpose, and know why you were created in the first place. See, at some point, human enthrallment on this earth will find its limit. And when it does, only a limitless God will still bring amazement, wonder, love, and truth to this world, and thereby allow man to continue to experience life as it was intended to be. The purpose, what you were created for, to model Jesus, can only be known and understood when you know your meaning and understand what your life is about. Experiencing the goodness of God. Without God, how do you come up with your meaning and purpose in life? Sure, you're free to make it up, but does that really mean that what you've made up is actually what you're here for? It's a very despairing picture we've painted. And it's not something I've painted, but even out of the mouth of atheist philosophers themselves. Identity, meaning and purpose, and I want to take a little bit of time to look at morality. Why do we need God? Because what do we do with this whole idea of morality? If there is no objective morality, then we need to explain certain things, like love. Why is love good? And we can't say it's because of the effects that it has on people. You have to go farther back in the argument for that. But what makes doing good things for people good? Why is it good to help others and be kind? Many of you remember a few months back, Boko Haram was on TV. And at this point in 2014, they have kidnapped 300 girls, more than 300 girls, boys, and women. If there is no objective morality, then we need to question why we're angry with them. Because for them, this is morally right. And this is the problem that we run into if there is no objective morality. We say that's wrong because there's a value to those girls' lives. They may see it differently. But additionally, because there's no objective morality, it makes it hard for us to speak against them. Why can't we tell them that they're wrong? On what grounding would we have to tell them that what they're doing is wrong? And the grave problem with this is once we feel like we can't tell somebody what they're doing is wrong, then we also will feel like we can't tell someone to stop. And now nobody's intervening and nobody's acting. And what kind of a world will we become if we hold to that idea? Now, I'm not saying that it is impossible to do good things without having belief in God. That's not what I'm saying. There are many people who do not have belief in God and do many, many, many good things, okay? What I'm saying is you don't have a good reason to tell me why those things are good. As a Christian, what I can say is those things are good because of who it is that's telling me, or because God is telling me that these things are good. But then the fair question you would have to ask me is, Alicia, well, just because God says they're good, what does that mean? How do I know I can even trust him? And that's a valid point. I want to close with just this one particular story of Jesus, where he was teaching one day, and the Pharisees, or the religious rulers of the time, were pretty angry with a lot of the stuff that he was saying. He was gaining followers, and they wanted to find a way to trap him and get him in trouble. So the next day, when Jesus is teaching again, they bring a woman to him who's caught in the act of adultery. And they throw this woman at Jesus' feet. In the public, mind you. This is not a private scene. You've got Jesus and you've got this woman who's now being humiliated in front of everybody. And you have the Pharisees standing around. And so they say to Jesus, Jesus, we caught her in the act of adultery. Don't you know what the law says? The law says she should be stoned. What do you say we do with her? So here's the trap they put Jesus in, okay? The trap is, if Jesus says we will ignore the law, then he clearly is not holding himself to the moral standards that God has. If Jesus says, yes, let's stone her, well, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. Why? Well, there was so much unrest going on at this time that there were Roman guards who were walking all around the temple, making sure that the Jews behaved themselves, making sure that they didn't carry out any kind of capital punishment or any kind of punishment that results in death. That's essentially what capital punishment is. They weren't allowed to do that. So the Roman guards were walking around to make sure nobody carried any of these actions out. So Jesus is, according to these Pharisees, he's in a trap. Because if he says we should stone her, well, he'll be arrested on the spot. So Jesus bends down and writes something in the ground. And he stands back up and he looks at them. He says, if any of you has never done anything wrong before, you may cast the first stone. And one by one, starting from the oldest to the youngest, they begin to walk away. What has happened here? You have to understand that in this culture, in this shame and in this honor culture, For any of those religious leaders to say they had never done anything wrong, to say that they had never, ever sinned, would have been an embarrassment and would have brought shame to their families. So they were trapped in a sense, because they couldn't deny that they had never done anything wrong. And because everybody follows the example of the elders in society, the eldest ones would have been the first to drop their stones and walk away, and the younger ones would have followed suit. So now Jesus is left with this woman. And he asks her, "Where'd everybody go?" And she says, "I don't know, they've left." And he tells her, "I don't condemn you either, but don't do this again." This story is fascinating. Because have we ever thought about what's going through this woman's mind as she gets up and walks away? She was this close to death. She's a woman in a society that doesn't see much value in her life. And here comes Jesus saying, "You do have value." She's a woman who has confused her meaning and is confused why she's here. But yet Jesus stands up for her publicly, giving her identity, giving her value in this life, that she is worth something. And what's amazing about this story is ultimately, this story is a story of the cross. Because what Jesus does by standing up for her is those religious leaders who brought her in front of him angry with her for what she had done are now leaving angry with him. He essentially has taken on her shame. He knows the law. He knows the penalty of the law. And he's saying, "I will take it on me. I will take on your shame." When you know your identity, you will understand the meaning and the purpose for why you're here. And when you understand the meaning and the purpose, you will then know the morality standards that you need to follow, because you would know in whom it is that you find your ultimate fulfillment and hope.
Hello friends, this is Ravi, Zacharias. We've been in this ministry at RZIM for over 30 years now. But one of the most thrilling things is about to take place in the launch of our Zacharias Institute. The building for that has already been purchased. It's the biggest endeavor we have ever gone into. It'll be, hopefully, Lord willing, open and launched in the early part of 2017. But you know what? It's a steep climb for us. Just to outfit the building, all the equipment that is needed, the lecture halls, the furnishings, the offices, everything that need to be done, the facilities for guest professors. It's a huge climb for us. Very steep indeed. Will you ask God what share he would have you have? Nothing is too small, nothing is too big.